So I suppose we have to explore what the significance of the Guru is and why the Guru's presence will be special and have an aura. And firstly, I don't really like the word Guru, so I'll replace it with the term competent teacher. What makes a teacher competent will be that teacher will always be tuned in to the divine. So that teacher, although there may be the same kind of things that are going on in anybody's life, still they know how to tune and retune if necessary and carry the presence of the divine with them. So that means then that's a kind of sample. And when that person goes and moves on physically because the teacher is always with you. And that's the promise given when mantra diksha is given, that the teacher is always with you regardless. Because the teacher's job is to take you by the hand and say, hey, wake up, look. And as long as you're not awake, and this is a job for the teacher, at some point or other, we have to really have faith. We will all be awake at some point. So the important practice is practicing the divine presence. Using that visit as a sample. Saying, the atmosphere was like that when the teacher was here, and it may fade, but how to bring it back. There's something that is more tangible than the teacher. Of course, the teacher is seen as the divine, and that is to always sit in the divine presence. We have to use many, many mechanisms to do it, because we're all suffering from forgetfulness. And so the remedy is remembrance, constant remembrance, which means being aware, where's the attention at any given moment? And then acknowledging that, saying, okay, come back. Like taking an animal for a walk, and all right, come back. You've had a little wander, now you come back. And that in itself is a form of spiritual practice. It's called abhyasa yoga. Abhyasa, bringing the mind back, bringing the attention back. We have a rod called attention, and that attention should be tuned in, just like when you drive a car, you have a rod attached to a wheel, and you use the wheel, and it becomes so habitual, when the car goes off, you don't say, oh, I must adjust, automatically your hands will do it. It becomes second nature. When our practice becomes a second nature, becomes automatic, then we have, in a sense, nothing to worry about except complacency. There should always be a watchfulness to see whether the attention goes off from moment to moment. And it can go off very easily when we feel overwhelmed or overcome by circumstances that drag us into a negative dialogue with ourselves, really a monologue. Oh dear, what a pity, instead of what a glory. So we have to understand that God is digesting your food because it has a purpose for you. That should always be asserted. There's something that you can do that no one else has ever done. No one else can do at the moment. No one else will ever do in the future. And that's put on your fingerprints. Before you were born, they will never be seen. They were never seen, they'll never be seen again when you die. The DNA is unique. So that uniqueness is there because you have a unique role in the play. And what is the play? The play is a total drama containing many, many manifestations of one thing. And so it can come out as human beings. They are the most difficult beings of all, baked beans, green beans, etc. Human beings are the most difficult, never mind. That adds to the interest. But then there are other beings that we seem to have more of a compassion for because they're innocent. A cat, a dog, and so on. Yeah, how cute. Or a baby, how cute, because the innocence is there. And then at a certain age, probably teenagers, it changes. You see. Now, that's one strata of life. And you can say that's one variation. Again, if you compare the whole of life to an ocean that erupts into various waves of various sizes and potency, then the human body, the human mind, the combination is the equipment that will lead you to your freedom, and that is the only purpose in life. You think you may have some other kinds of purpose, but it is the only purpose in life will be, in theistic language, a vision of God. In the philosophical language, freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom from limitations, freedom from slavery. Now you may say, I don't feel like a slave. From time to time, we all feel like a slave. And what is making us a slave is because these restrictions on our freedom we take as a natural law. We think that they are supposed to be there. And the illusion or the deception will be, it's like a cow that is tethered to a post and given some rope and walks around a field and feels, I am free. You're not. You're still tethered and you can't go beyond your field. You only have a small patch of grass to eat in. Real freedom is the freedom to go where you want, to do what you want, without the restrictions of stress, without being subject to difficulties, even though the same circumstances that people interpret as a difficulty are still there, but we don't take it as a difficulty. We simply take it as an obstacle in the game, just as when we play a rugby, no point if there are no opposition players. There's no point if there's no difficulties. I can play this game or rugby, but just don't tackle me. Then why play the game at all? Put the score up in the first place and leave it there. But what kind of victory will that be? So we have to interpret what we call life in, and I gave this talk last night, in the same way that physics really, if they're honest, will interpret what we call nature. A series of oscillations, a series of waves with wavelengths and frequencies that come up and go down, that have their day and disappear. And when we observe life, life is only that interval between the start and the finish, the birth and the death. What we do in between is important. So there is only one being, there's only one totality. And it looks like this totality has many different parts. It's only because we're looking at the parts, we're not looking at the overall. We're only looking at the segments, the points. We're not looking at the totality. We're not looking at the holistic side of things. We're like looking at a picture screen and only with a narrow vision, with a kind of limitation of understanding and interpretation. That I can't make out these patterns. Well, we're looking at 4 or 5 pixels. When you move away, oh, I see that the whole picture is there. And without the picture, the pixels make no sense. So we're struggling trying to figure out what is this all about, because we don't realize this unity of existence, which is a holistic thing. And so, how is it that the body survives and and lives, not just survives, but lives. Some inner thing is digesting your food. Some inner loving being is pumping your heart, repairing all your cells, renewing them all, giving life to every individual cells and making a cooperative of it. Collectively called a body. And there's one axiom that we give in Vedanta. We say that what happens here happens everywhere. So if there's a body here, the whole universe must be something like a body. If there's a mind here, the whole universe must have a mind. And that mind we call God. And then there's something beyond that. So every single form of it is actually that same being. Do we notice it? When we don't notice it, we become fearful, doubtful, and we have some problems, generally called pain. So, for this body to live, we require a certain combination of gases in the air. We require sunshine. With that sunshine and with those gases and with water and all of those kinds of things, creating hydrocarbons and so on, ultimately carbohydrates that we munch and crunch on. All of these necessary ingredients for growth are there, including the life of plants, which generously give us oxygen. A wonderful exchange. They take the carbon dioxide, that helps their growth. They take the hydrogen from water, they make hydrocarbons. They're a wonderful, wonderful arrangement. Can we then say that plants are not part of the divine arrangement? They're integral to the divine arrangement. And are plants, trees, let's take for example, are they conscious? Yes, they are conscious. Now don't take my word for it. The great scientist Jagadish Chandra Bose, he created some evidence of it. But the remarkable thing is that trees don't have brains. They don't have a nervous system. How can they be intelligent? But the arrangement that varying aspects of life have, the arrangement in nature is threefold, where one thing will dominate, another thing may not. And these are these three qualities which are there in the whole of nature. Psychologically described as inertia, laziness, dullness, or an emphasis on self-interest. And then the other thing is being dynamic, active, a go-getter, having goals and working toward that. That's better than being dull. Get your energy up and direct it. But it still produces pain because it's self-centered. Anything self-centered will produce tremendous pain for you because it's a seesaw. It's a kind of arrangement whereby we have a hollow when we don't have something, and we have an elation when we have something, followed by another hollow. And so we never get satisfied. Glass half empty, half full. We never get satisfied. There's always a gap somewhere. And if that gap gets full, we say, okay, been there, done that, but another one comes. So you never get to this point of complete satisfaction and settlement. And so what to do? You have to explore the possibility of complete fullness, complete totality, complete unity. And when you access that, then you have what we saw earlier. We're referring to Gospel of Ramakrishna, and there is described that love is the way. And so to increase that love, to love fully what is termed as Sat-Chit Ananda. There is existence, consciousness, and bliss absolute, the foundation of everything. It comes out as buddhi, the cosmic mind, that we call God. And it's sufficient for us to make an alliance, then a relationship, and then a complete absorption into that. That's the progress in terms of this aspect of love, which is the highest value we have, the least selfish. So somebody who's lived their life as a bachelor, let's say, will will get into the natural arrangement of things, which says, I'm going to draw you into an attraction situation, putting you under a circumstance where light is low, and you look into the molecules called eyes, and you say, I'm in love with you. And then somebody says, well, what is the attraction? You say, oh, I'm in love with you. You're in love with molecules. We didn't interpret them as molecules. And yet the eyes are shining. There's life there. It's a living entity. And then you see, you start talking, and then the mating ritual takes place, and then the rest you know. So why is that? It's because we found something that was reflected in, and we call that reflection life. And at the bottom of it is the author of life, life itself, we may say, existence itself, coming through as intelligence, coming through as awareness, consciousness, and giving us the opportunity for a reflection of the bliss that we call joy. We forget that the person we're talking to carries a septic tank. We forget that on the skin, billions and billions and billions, possibly trillions, of cities and cities, of metropolitans of bacteria. We forget that the air around will carry the possibility of viruses that feed on the bacteria, possibly, and so on. We forget that the body is a magnificent machine that has a whole manufacturing sector. We put raw material in here, it goes into a crushing section, and then a conveyor belt or takes it down into a big pot. In the meantime, all chemicals are added, breaking the thing down, churning it up into a sludge, and then feeding it into a small intestine with all the other side chemical manufacturing sectors feeding into that, and then transferring all of that into the bloodstream, where we have the capacity to transfer the raw materials, the sugars, into energy, and take the waste materials off. And those cells are designed like a train to take that all off through the lymphatic system and so on. And that's not the end of it. Then it goes into the sewage system where water is filtered off, taken separately, solids are made, an extruder is there, and you know the rest. So we don't see all of that because nature has designed it in such a way. If we saw all that, we may not want to perpetuate the species and prolong the game. So it requires a discernment. Every person who looks at a tree, even not understanding the life-giving nature of the tree, will surely have an admiration for the beauty of it and the technical construction of it, and the wonder that from a small seed comes a big tree. The whole tree was contained in the small seed. The potentiality of the tree is contained in that. And it just requires looking after, and it grows and grows and grows. But growth doesn't come from the outside. It's all coming from the inside. The ingenuity of growing is in the inside. How can you say that there's no intelligence, even in that seed, even in the growth, even in the distribution of the leaves, even in the form of the leaf designed so excess rainfall drains off? These are just some of the marvels of a simple thing called a tree. And people like trees. They spend a fortune visiting forests. They spend a lot of time walking in so-called nature, forgetting they're part of nature. And there's an intrinsic synergy there which has an aesthetic appreciation for trees and ferns and plants, and people can make a botanical survey of it, get an interest in it, identify what flowers are what. And not only that, but birds have that same appreciation. They use it as a landing ground, as a nesting ground. And it's part of a whole totality, which we call nature. It doesn't operate unless there is a sense of life, which we call existence, a sense of consciousness, which allows the ingenuity of growth and so on, and a sense of beauty. All of that is contained. And we have an aesthetic appreciation for that, inexplicably, because you cannot define it. A spontaneous feeling comes up about it, because we have an inbuilt appreciation for the divine in the form of life, existence, in the form of intelligence and consciousness, and in the form of bliss and joy and beauty. All of that combined, the aesthetics. So tuning into that is easy. What is not easy is when we're dealing with a difficult situation, we forget all of that. We forget the fantastic marvel of the human body. We forget that we are, generally speaking, not in a position of homelessness, generally, not in a position of poverty, generally, not in a position of starvation, generally. All of this we take for granted and assert, I have a right to it. No, you don't. It's a free gift. At least once or twice we can say thanks. What is worship? Occasionally saying thanks. What is meaningful worship? Continuously being in a mode of thankfulness, appreciation, an elevated state of joy continuously, a kind of internal rapture where not only do we appreciate it, but we internally feel its presence. And that tuning in wherever we look. So yes, what we call God is not only in a tree, in a plant, but dressed up, not only there, but inside it, through it, as it, and beyond it. So yes, there are these various koshas, levels, layers, even within a tree. The outside we see the bark. Inside is energy in its various form, enabling growth. Inside it is consciousness, without which it cannot distinguish. It cannot say, I will grow and use a space that another tree is not occupying and look for where the sun is. If you want real evidence of that, I've never been to the Amazon forest, but we can easily, these days, look up and see, get the information about it. And you'll see that different stratas are there in the Amazon rainforest. And there's no competition, because every variety finds its own way and gives us a lesson in life. We should take the non-competitive gap always. Because we are unique, because we have a specialness and a purpose, there's no need to be competitive. We take the non-competitive gap always. Same thing in rugby, you'll find it. In rugby, where you see a gap, that's where you run. When you play football, to kick a ball, you have to raise the foot. Well, there's a gap when you do that. A skilled player will put the ball in. So then, of course, underneath it all, same thing. God sits there. And before the tree was, it sat there and wound itself around it made a body around it, wove a body around it. So the Upanishads will give us multiple examples of that. Say that it is inside, it is the internal controller. That's the phrase that is used. So we can say inside the tree doesn't know it. But it is the inner controller of that. The inner control of the earth, inner controller of the plant, inner control of the flower, inner control of the insect, inner controller of the small ladybird beetle, inner controller of the bacteria, inner controller of every single atom, inner controller of every single field that the atoms come up from. And there's only one thing which is there, and that is that sum totality. And we call that God. And through forming this splendid relationship of love with that, we gain access to that totality. That's the keyhole to the totality. Yeah. Well, that's the short answer to your questions. I hope I've answered both questions, both from here. Yeah. See, without that, how will we see God in there? All the layers that we experience in the whole of organic life are there, not only in the human, but in every being. After all, how does the human evolve biologically? So it's not just the mammalian species, the reptilian species, and so on. Because the DNA that we have, there's also a genetic relationship with plants. That's clear evidence of the biological evolution, of course. So if you wanted a genesis, you say, if you're a bacteriologist, you'll say, in the beginning was bacteria. And we all came from it. But that's just biologically, because the real essence of that will be that which is manifesting. And so the only difference between this human and a tree, for example, will be the level of manifestation. And the only difference between the human body and a rock is also in manifestation of these various, we can call them qualities or distinguishing factors. We call these gunas, binding elements. In other words, guna literally means a rope. And they are consisting of inertia, we can call it, and then dynamic activity, and then the balancing between them all, the unifying factor of sattva, purity. So how do we progress spiritually? We are trying to promote sattva all the time, sattva, 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 continuously. And when we observe any one of the other two, we say, thank you very much. You're an old friend from childhood. Good. Now in the next second, I'm going to put something, and I'm going to put it in terms of words. Because word and form is the same thing. One is a subtle form of the other, and the whole of the universe consists of this nama-rupa, name and form. So the form, for example, of an elephant is something that we see, and we remember elephant. We all know what is elephant. But then when I'm sitting alone, and I think, that was a wonderful park I went to in Africa, and I saw all these elephants. Immediately I'm thinking elephants. Picture of elephant comes. It's not that an elephant got stuffed into the head. So there's a subtle form of it that comes as a picture associated with a word. Word and picture come together. You cannot have a word without a concept. And so when you bring out these concepts deliberately, consciously, by using words, You know the words I use: strong, true, wise, full, free, truth, beauty, goodness, love, harmony, etc. You use your own versions of it. Continuously doing that. This is what Ramakrishna calls singing the glories of the divine. Four things are there. Always sing the glories of the divine. Then always repeat his name lovingly. And then seek holy company. And then from time to time go into solitude. So, okay, they say when the teacher is there, it's holy company, we feel spiritually uplifted, a different atmosphere there. But when the teacher goes and leaves your house, then your company will be the presence of the divine, evoked by the name. When you call somebody by name, they say yes. So the repetition of the mantra, an easy form of spiritual practice that anybody can do. Anybody can chant the name, but it requires devotion and love to feel the presence in the name. If the name has no meaning, then you're not calling on anybody. So by repeating the name, you are bringing the holy presence. Come. Whenever you repeat the name in the form of the mantra, the divine presence is there. And then the question comes, well, throughout the day, how can I continuously repeat this while I'm doing this work and that work and so on and so forth? We get used to unconsciously repeating it continuously. The habit of repetition continues as a kind of background. And then in moments where no specific concentrated activity is there, we can deliberately repeat it. So if you want to think of somebody who's dear to you, you cannot think of them without unconsciously repeating their name. Inadvertently you do it. So by repeating the name, you're calling the person. It's like calling a person up on the telephone. First thing, who are you calling? You'll tell the name. So that is the power of japa. And every spiritual teacher worthwhile will teach the importance of this repetition. Be it in the Eastern Orthodox that they call the Jesus prayer, be it in the Roman Catholic Church where they repeat the rosary, be it in the Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, where they repeat either Vedic mantras or Tantric mantras or both. Whatever it is, even the meaningless repetition of it has some value, not much, but the repetition with meaning, the way Patanjali puts it, with a repetition of Om and meditating on its meaning, doesn't leave it there, see. I had so many interesting discussions. There used to be a group, as you know, called the Chant and Chai, and people went there and they chanted all kinds of mantras and so on, and it was delightful. And you ask them, what does it mean? And we don't know, but we don't care because we like it, you know. But if you want to be detailed and scientifically minded, you say, well, the reason why you feel nice about this is maybe because everyone's chanting in unity, maybe because there's a rhythm to it, maybe because it sounds nice. But the added value would be to understand, what does it mean? You surely won't repeat something that you don't know. So repeating the divine name systematically and continuously brings to mind that form and facilitates an intimate connection with it, because it keeps you in mind. It's practicing the presence of the divine continuously. So for people, first-time people, one of the foundation books I say, read Brother Lawrence's book, Practicing the Presence, and see how he, an uneducated person, always felt the joy no matter what he was doing, whether it was washing the floor or cleaning the toilets or cooking the food or answering the door, whatever the activity was. He found great joy in it. Why? Because he was never alone. He was always practicing the presence. His attention was always tuned in. And so the repetition of a mantra, the practice of japa, is a wonderful tuning mechanism that brings to us the divine presence. Prayer does it, japa does it. And then the singing of the divine glories. That means noticing this wonderful glory expressed everywhere. You know, there's often a contemporary discussion, debate, and so on between atheists and theists and all of that. Is there any evidence? Yes, everywhere. You just didn't notice it. You thought it was all just random stuff that just suddenly appeared, or maybe appeared over eons of time. You don't know where it came from. You don't know how it developed. You're just guessing. But if you put it with a capital C by chance, then you haven't really got a satisfactory answer, number one. Number two, you haven't got the glory of it, the joy of it. There was a wonderful statement, simple statement by Ronald Reagan. I think I told you, Ronald Reagan. He said, I never understand my atheist friends, but I feel like inviting them to a sumptuous feast where the best of everything is produced, all the greatest delicacies they would like to eat. And after they've enjoyed the whole thing, you ask them, tell me, do you believe that there is no chef or cook in the kitchen? So there's no cause of it. So there's an absence, therefore, of the opportunity for rapture, but also to notice very carefully that this divine presence is clearly manifest in everything. And it's more manifest in the peak of the evolutionary process, namely man. And even so, it's more manifest in the saint, more manifest in the prime examples of sanctity, morality, holy life, and so on. And we don't have to think about it too much because there is a feeling about heroism that is completely intangible. That is, take, for example, Nelson Mandela, universally acclaimed. Now, I don't know if he was a saintly person, but he was a person of character that we all admire. Something about it, something even intangible about it. We automatically have a feeling for it. And we don't have that same feeling for all those characters that museums are stuffed full of. You know, brutes who fought wars and what have you. And you create a bronze statue there or put them in a museum, history books and so on. We don't have that connection, but we automatically have a connection with noble people. So we automatically recognize the height of evolution. What is evolution? It is that divine manifesting itself. And so when we learn to accelerate that manifestation, it is called spiritual life. Well, then we can leave it there for this evening. Yeah. So, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be on all. Right. Good.
Swamiji.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.